One day, a long time ago, a strange flotilla of boats laden with men, women, children, and a few books was seen approaching the western coast of India. At daybreak, the travelers gradually became distinguishable. Their eyes were filled with a kind of fear, a fear induced by unknown places and an uncertain future. But as the boats came ashore one after another, their anxiety gradually dissipated. We are at the dawn of the 8th century AD, and these people have come from another world, one which has suffered a brutal invasion, forcing them to abandon their ancestral lands. They are Zoroastrians seeking shelter on the western shores of India. The future of a religion that had been institutionalized by the greatest empires in Persia now lay in their hands. The populations that would become known as Parsis merged with great ease into their new environment and the communities of their host country. So much so that despite their small numbers, they became intimately involved in the march of the history of the Indian nation. Accounts describing the journey of the Parsis from Persia to India are very scarce. Among these is the Qisseh-e-Sanjan. It is rejected by some scholars, while others consider it something of a prophetic text. At any rate, it seems to recount the epic voyage of Zoroastrians from Persia to India.
This oral tradition and this Qisseh-e-Sanjan, etc., have not been refuted by anybody. And since the holiest of holy fires was there, the history of this period mainly revolves around the history of the fire rather than history of the people or the history of the kings.
This is for the sole reason of protecting their religion. So the high priest at that time, the priest among them, they visualized that the religion would be saved only in the country of India.
The Qisseh-e-Sanjan, written in 864 lines, describes the incredible journey of the ancestors of the present-day Parsis. It recounts how they abandoned their homeland following the Arab invasions of the 7th century AD and the subsequent fall of the Persian Empire to finally arrive in Gujarat on the west coast of India. The text also mentions the famous story of the sugar in the milk. The priestly leaders were brought before the local ruler, Jadi Rana, who presented them with a vessel brimful of milk to signify that the surrounding lands could not possibly accommodate any more people. The Parsi head priest responded by slipping some sugar into the milk to signify how the strangers would enrich the local community without displacing them. They would dissolve into life like sugar dissolves in milk, sweetening the society but not unsettling it. The Qisseh-e-Sanjan was written around 1600 AD, that is some 800 years after the Arab invasions and the departure of the Zoroastrians to India. It is the only written source available to us. But how trustworthy is it? Some consider it as pure myth, while others such as the archaeologist Rukshana Nanji, believe that evidence partly corroborates it and sometimes moves away completely. Starting in 2002, she worked for 3 years with a team of archaeologists on excavations in Sanjan that were initiated by the founder of the World Zarathushti Cultural Foundation, Dr. Homi Dalla. The very spot where the Zoroastrians were supposed to have landed in India and where they resided for almost 700 years. For the first time, a scientific investigation would prove the veracity or otherwise of the Kisei Sanjan.
The first year when we went to the site and we excavated, it was almost at the top of the mound, but in the heart of the little fishing village that's called Sanjan Bandar. Now, Sanjan Bandar is on the bank of the Varoli river. And this excavation was very small, but it threw up a lot of evidence, much more than we expected. You know, in the first year itself, we found an entire settlement with brick-built floors and walls and ring wells and drainage systems, and the most fantastic glazed pottery from Persia and, you know, the Persian Gulf, Chinese porcelain and Chinese celadons on the other hand, and Indian wares. And this sort of archaeological evidence had never come to light anywhere in India before. So we realized that we are not looking at just a Zoroastrian settlement, but probably a very big, prosperous settlement of people who were not only rich enough to afford this, but were probably trading in all these goods, either with China or with the Persian Gulf.
Excavations were started there with the help of the Archaeological Survey of India, and some prominent archaeologists from different parts of India came, and in 2002 the first excavation was started, and we were fortunate enough to find about 1200 artifacts, you know, ceramics, pottery, glass, coins, bangles and whatnot. And it pointed to the fact that our ancestors, when they came here, they were traders, and we were trading because of the various pottery and whatnot that we found. We came to know that we were trading with places like China and Mesopotamia, Egypt, and of course Iran, because we found a lot of pottery from Iran.
According to the Kisei Sanjan, this place was named in memory of the town in the province of Khorasan in northeast Iran, where the Zoroastrians originally came from. The story indicates the presence of Parsis in the 8th century, but archaeologists believe that they had arrived earlier, towards the end of the 7th century. They also think that Sanjan existed as a town long before the arrival of the Parsis, who did not land there directly. After leaving Iran, they first landed on the island of Diu, where they remained for 19 years. They then proceeded to Sanjan, a place that was apparently not unknown to them.
We do know for a fact that while we landed at Sanjan, we may have added a new colony, a new settlement to the old settlement which was already there. It's not also just the Indian sources that speak of Sanjan. Interestingly enough, if you calculate the distances that are mentioned by the Islamic writers, by the Muslim writers and the Arab geographers, you find that Sanjan is mentioned as Sindan. Sindan was the original name used by the Arab traders who were also coming to India and to the Malabar coast, or to Khambat or Bharuch, or to any of the other ports. So Sanjan was a very important port city which had a thriving population of people, but I think this international trade started with the coming of the Zoroastrians. And I don't think it was just one migration. I think there may have been several migrations that had taken place over a period of time. I also think that they did not come to a completely strange country. Because if you look at the Kisse Sanjan, they very clearly say that the Dastur who was leading this group, he says, our time in this land is over. When they are leaving from Hormuz, he says, our time in this land is over. Let us now go to the land of Hind.
The newcomers were traders and had in their possession richly decorated pottery and utensils from the Persian Gulf and China. But how certain are we that they were Zoroastrians? According to Rukshana Nanji and other archaeologists, two elements would confirm the identity of these migrants: a fire temple, which is the Zoroastrian place of worship, and a dakma or tower of silence, which serves as the last resting place of the dead. Here, the corpses are devoured by vultures rather than contaminating the earth, which is sacred to Zoroastrians. But excavations cannot be undertaken everywhere, and what's more, there may be new constructions over sites that may contain ancient remains. But through perseverance, archaeologists finally excavated a very important site.
Whenever Zoroastrians moved to new places, they followed one principle of constructing a fire temple and a tower of silence. And when they came to Sanjan and settled here, one of the first things they did was construct this small tower of silence. According to tradition, there are other towers also, but we do not know exactly where they have been located. This is the site where the excavation took place, and this is the oldest archaeological excavated site in the world of the Parsi community. And we found a number of bones here, and they were sent to Oxford for dating and for the study of bones, and some very fascinating things came out of it. The bones that were sent, they dated it to about 600 years old. So it shows that after that the dakma was not used. Although the site is 1,000 years old, the bones are 600 years old.
There must have been the bones of at least 450 individuals within the central well of the dakma. And when I say the central well, I mean just a small little circular depression which was about 5 meters across and 1 meter deep. So it was really jam-packed with bones. And these were bones of people of both sexes, all ages, from little babies to old people, really old people, almost 70, 75 years. Now, once we had this evidence, we knew that we are looking at a site where definitely there was a very sizable and large Zoroastrian population. And this sort of gave us clinching evidence that yes, the site has a Zoroastrian sizable population. It doesn't mean that the entire Sanjan settlement was only Zoroastrian. But yes, there was a very sizable and a very large number of Zoroastrians that were settled there and were actually trading perhaps with the Persian Gulf, with the home country.
This column is called the Sanjan Stamb, and it was constructed in memory of the Zoroastrians who left Iran and came to the shores of India to protect and preserve their religion. It specifically mentions the kindness and the compassion of the Indian ruler Jade Rana, who afforded us shelter and protection in our days of trial. It was launched on 6th of August 1917, and it was formally opened by Sir Jamsetji Jijibai, the 5th Baronet, on the 15th of February 1920. Once in a year, the members of the community gather at Sanjan. It's called the Sanjan Day, sometime in November every year, and remember the migrants and also the kindness of Jadev Rana.
Not far from the coast, it seems that nature also acknowledged the arrival of the Parsis. This tree is a botanical oddity, and according to local legend, it moves as if to follow the Parsis in their travels.
This, according to the locals, is the Chalto Ambo, which means, translates into the walking mango tree. And they tell us that over the centuries it has moved gradually.
Mango trees don't usually do this, but this tree puts down its branches very low. And after a period of time, the branch that is lowest to the ground takes root and the main trunk dies. So that this now becomes a new tree. And and then it puts out branches, and this goes on happening. So the tree has gradually been moving over a space of, time.
And according to some, it is the Zoroastrians, when they landed here, they were the ones who planted this mango tree.
And it has walked all the way from Nargola. I'm not sure if this is true, but it's a very pretty story. And it just illustrates to you that everything in Sanjan, maybe because of some kind of a memory that people have, stories that they've built up over time, everything seems to be connected to the Parsi migration. They will also tell you that there is a well which is in present use. It's the only well on the Sanjan Bandar which has fresh water and very sweet water, and provides water to the entire area. There's a little dargah next door. There's a little shrine next door, Muslim shrine next door. And people will tell you, oh, that is the grave of a Muslim saint who was here to welcome the Parsis when they first came to Sanjan, and he gave them water.
Now that we know the identity of these migrants who arrived in India at the end of the 7th century, it becomes necessary to know why they risked their lives in undertaking such a dangerous journey. Why did they feel this urgent need to come to India, where they knew they would probably be safe? The first pages of the Qisse Sanjan tell us that in the Avesta, the sacred book of Zoroastrians, the prophet Zarathustra had forewarned his followers of 3 distinct periods fraught with danger to themselves and the region. The invasion of Alexander of Macedonia, who burnt down Persepolis and destroyed the sacred texts of the Achaemenian Persians and Zoroastrians. The period between the death of Ardashir, the founder of the Sassanid Empire, and the reign of Shapur III in 309 AD. And the Arab invasions, followed by the death of Yazdegerd III and the fall of the Sassanid Empire. For 100 years, the Zoroastrians took refuge in the mountains of Kohistan before a wise man advised them to leave these inhospitable lands and travel to Hormuz on the Persian Gulf. There, they stayed for 15 years. According to the text, the Zoroastrians were persecuted throughout these years before a wise holy priest or dastur consulted his astrological tables and declared, "The time of bliss on this earth has come to an end, and we should now leave this country. It would be best for us to move away from these unbelievers and establish ourselves in India in order to save our lives and preserve our faith." A short while after this prophecy, the boats were ready to sail. So much for the Récit Sanjan. But how did all this really happen, and what proof is there to confirm this tale? In order to understand the turn of events, we need to turn back to history. In the year 633 AD, Arab armies invaded Persia. The death of King Khosrow II left the Persians in a weak position against the Arab invaders. From the outset, the Muslims tried to consolidate their stranglehold on territories bordering the deserts. However, under the leadership of King Yazdegerd III, the Sasanians counterattacked and achieved an important victory at the Battle of the Bridge by the Euphrates in 634 AD.
با آمدن حضرت محمد و دین اسلام ناگهان قبایل متعدد عرب که حالا هم در شهرهای مثل مکه و مدینه بودن و بقیه که بدوی بودن متحد میشن و این یک قدرت عظیمی هست که ناگهان متحد شده. در صورتی که قبل از این باید یادمون باشه که بسیاری از اعرابی که حالا شهرنشین بودن و قدرت حکومت داشتن مثل غسانیان و غیره در حقیقت با حکومت ساسانی و رومی همکاری میکردن و بعد اونها در حقیقت یک دفاعی بودن در مقابل بقیه عرب که بخوان به ایران حمله بکنن و به روم. در اواخر دوره ساسانی این از بین میره، در حقیقت این دیوار حفاظی از عربستان. از طرف دیگه به هر حال همونطور که گفتم فعل و انفعالاتی در داخل ایران شهر به وجود اومده، مشکلات متعدد و درگیری‌های درونی، همچنین با جنگ طاقت فرسایی که با رومی ها داشتن، ایرانیان ارتش رو ضعیف کرده بود. یعنی میشه گفت چند مسئله و پدیده مختلف دست در دست هم میده و باعث میشه که بتونن این اعراب مسلمان متحد ناگهان یک ارتش قوی و یک امپراتوری قوی مانند ساسانیان رو در هم بشکنن.
Yazdegerd disposed of a large number of soldiers who were all ready to fight the invaders so that their empire and their official religion may survive. And yet, in 642, in Nahavand, some 60 kilometers south of Hamadan, a decisive battle signed the death warrant of the Persian Empire. The Persian army walked into a trap and was massacred.
به یک مرحله ما رسیده بودیم از تاریخ ایران که به هر حال به نظر میرسه که عرب مسلمان با هر کی می‌جنگیدن موفق می‌شدن. در خود ایران شهر اون انسجام وجود نداشت که ژنرال‌های مختلف در استان‌های مختلف سعی می‌کردن که خودشون رو حالا به حقانیت برسونن و رهبر بشن یا شاه بشن و این خب خودش یک مشکل بود که یک جوانی با اینکه از خاندان ساسانه بره از استان به استان سعی کنه کمک بگیره و این کار رو یزدگرد میکنه، از استان به استان میره دنبال ارتش و سعی میکنه که ایستادگی کنه و حتی دوتا فرزنداشو میفرسته به چین، یکی در حقیقت میرن به بیزانس، یکی به چین برای کمک که ارتشی هم چینی‌ها کمک میکنن بهشون همراه ترکان که در سیستان برای مدتی تا سال حدود 670 میلادی یعنی 20 سال بعد از مرگ خود یزدگرد حکومتی نسبتا مستقل دارن تا عرب اونها رو هم شکست میدن. یزدگرد سعیش رو کرد ولی زمانی جوری بود که دیگه نمیشد ایستادگی کرد در مقابل عرب.
As the Arab conquest progressed, some Zoroastrians began to flee, while others, despite the dangers, stayed behind. Among those who decided to leave, a great many were not in much of a hurry. There was the chance, they thought, that Yazdegerd would return from exile in China and reconquer their lost lands. Also, living conditions were perhaps not as bad as the Resey Sanjan suggested. Historical research has in fact demonstrated that Zoroastrians were not obliged to give up their faith or beliefs, or at least not from the outset.
A lot of books, etc., tell you that all Zoroastrians were killed off and whatever, but it's not true because Zoroastrianism continued. A lot of work is being done now on this period, which showed a resurgence of almost scholarship, as some scholars put it, in Zoroastrianism, because they wanted to go back to the roots to be able to stand up against the Arab hordes. Also, it's wrong to say that the Arabs wanted to convert everybody at the same time, because Arabs basically were traders. And they lost a lot of money if everybody converted to Islam and did not pay the jizya. This is something that most people forget.
معمولاً عرب بهشون میگفتن یا میتونین مسلمان بشین یا جزیه بپردازین و دینتون رو نگه دارید، سومی که بجنگید و ممکنه به اسارت برسید و حالا خانواده از هم میپاشه و خودشون کشته میشن مردم. اونایی که خب قبول کردن جزیه بدن که بسیار به نظرم زیاد بودن، دینشون نگه میدارن و در چند قرن اوایل دوره اسلامی ما میگیم به هر حال زرتشتیان هنوز بسیار قوی بودن و ما متن‌های بسیاری به زبان پهلوی که نوشته موبدان زرتشتی هم هست در دست داریم از همون قرون.
However, the arrival of the Arabs sounded the death knell for the commercial activities of Zoroastrians. Being merchants and traders themselves, the Arabs did not allow Zoroastrians to continue to flourish in this field of activity. That was when many decided to leave.
There were still Zoroastrians who stayed back in Iran, and these were groups that came away. The reason why they stick to the coast of the western coast of India is because they are traders, they are merchants, they are sailors, and it is because the persecution that they faced was not just religious but perhaps economic, it was perhaps commercial, or maybe they found that the new competition from Arab travelers and Arab sailors was something that they could not keep up with. Perhaps it was because of that they were coming to a place which was already known, a place with which they had trading contacts, and they came here because they saw good commercial opportunities.
When they landed in India, the Parsis had to first consecrate their Iran Shah, the fire that symbolized their king, their guiding light. This flame is the most precious thing that nature can offer them, the symbol of Ahura Mazda himself. They also brought copies of the Avesta and the Gathas, which are hymns composed by Zarathustra himself, who lived between 5000 and 6000 BC under the Kayanian dynasty. Devoid of their guiding king, the flame became the symbol of his temporal and spiritual power.
The Parsis were always under the Shah. They ruled under Shah meaning king. So they were oriented to be administered by a ruler, a king. So in the absence of now a physical king of Iran, they call this fire, they consider him as the king. That's why they call this king of Iran. So it is given the title of Iran Shah. That is the idea behind it. Now since then Iran Shah is there, ever burning, without fail. At present it is in Udwara. There is a story about its different journey.
A group of Zoroastrians have embarked on their journey to India and are approaching land. Let us return to the Resey Sanjan. Before arriving at Sanjan, they landed at Diu, where they remained for 19 years. They set off to sea again and had to defy violent storms that threatened their lives and boats. But they prayed the Almighty, who answered their call by dissipating the tempest. Finally, they landed at Sanjan, where the local ruler, Jadi Rana, allowed them to stay on condition that they abide by 5 pledges they made: to teach him the basic tenets of their religion, to stop using the Pahlavi, their ancestral language, to refrain from carrying weapons, and that their women wear the local dress. And finally, that weddings be celebrated at night as performed by Hindus, rather than at dawn, which was customary in Zoroastrianism. This gives an indication that either Jadi Rana knew the Zoroastrian customs, or that this text was added deliberately by the author. The Zoroastrian high priest assured the governor of Gujarat that his people would not only refrain from harming the locals, but would be friends to all inhabitants of Hindustan. Curiously, Jadi Rana, the Hindu governor, is not mentioned by any other historical source. There is, however, mention of a Muslim governor made in several sources, including a number of copper plates. Archaeologists have discovered 3 sets of copper plates dating back to between 966 and 1053 AD. These are known as the Sitchin copper plates. One of these plates is a gift that was made to a Hindu temple by the governor of the port of Sanjan, who requested that the representatives of all religious communities be present.
Parsis are distinguished from other foreigners like the Tajiks who are living there. But the most interesting thing is that the governor who is making this grant is a Muslim governor by the name of Sugatipa, Muhammad Sugatipa. And all these communities are living in peace, they are trading, they are doing very well, and they have no problems with the administration, be it Muslim, Hindu or any other kind.
While many Zoroastrians from Iran traveled in all directions to China, Europe and Africa, among the groups who came to India, some traveled southward. Certain historical texts testify to their presence in southern India around the 9th century AD. Today, they have been assimilated into other religious communities.
And another interesting little fact that has come to light only recently is a small inscription which was found in South India, in Kerala. And this inscription is very interesting because it is a grant given to a Catholic Syrian church. And in this document, which is housed in this church in Cochin, it's very, very interesting that in 883, a grant is made by the King Sthanu Ravi to this church, and to this Catholic church he gives grants of lands and villages, and he orders people to do several things, offer services and stuff. And the interesting thing is that the witnesses to this grant sign in 3 different languages. The signatures are in Tamil, so the local populations are called to witness it in Tamil. Then there are signatures in Pelvi, and there are signatures in Aramaic on the side. And the signatures, the names themselves tell you who these people are. Several people have studied these inscriptions actually. They have linguistically studied these names and identify almost all of them as Zoroastrian names. So they may have very well been a colony or a settlement, a crafts village of traders down in Kerala, right down in South India on the Malabar coast, also of Zoroastrian traders. And this is not impossible because that was the Spice Coast.
Priesthood that came with that, they were known as Magga Brahmins. And they were the ones that Hindu texts said they were the only ones who could preside at a sun temple. And this was a time when the sun temple worship was very important. Unfortunately, the Hindus have a great capacity for assimilation, and they got assimilated into the Hindu fold, as I told you, as Hindu priests.
The newly installed Parsi community began to organize everyday life. Their women now wore the traditional sari and spoke in Gujarati or Hindi. They used in their diet the sap of certain trees and whatever their new environment had to offer. They continued to trade, and the proximity of the port provided many opportunities. They engaged in commerce with China, Arabia, and Europe. But they were not totally absorbed by India. Despite the long distance separating them from Iran, the Parsis never cut their ties with their motherland. In fact, envoys were sent on long journeys so as to gather more knowledge from those Zoroastrians who stayed in Iran. These journeys were certainly difficult, but essential for the survival of Zoroastrianism and its precepts. The Pahlavi texts that were later written in Farsi had to be deciphered, explained, and compared with the knowledge of Iranian high priests. The Qisseh also tells us that following a request from the Zoroastrians, a piece of land was designated by the local governor for the construction of a fire temple. Around the temple, a community of Parsis began to take form, where the arts and various handicrafts flourished thanks to the knowledge and means they had brought with them from Khorasan. But before the fire temple could fulfill its function, it first had to be consecrated.
Again, in the Qisseh Sanjan, we have this tradition that when the sacred fire had to be installed in Sanjan, they did send back a team back to Iran to get the ritual implements from Iran which were necessary to consecrate the holy fire. So like that, such a team must have gone, when it must have gone to Iran, the tradition just talks to us about ritual implements, but they must have got more other important things with them, like the method of consecrating the fire and other such things. So I believe that at least that one team, and like that there must have been other teams who may have gone for one reason or the other, back and again come back. So in those initial few decades, they must have tried and got back some important text with them. But we have no manuscript of that period available with us anymore.
It is said that the celebrations went on to become a magnificent festival. There followed 300 years before the Parsis began to disperse all over India. All seemed well for the Parsi communities, but in the 12th century AD, storm clouds began to appear. The Qisseh Sanjan describes a second Arab invasion. Troops under the command of Alaf Khan defied the Hindu armies and stormed Sanjan. The Parsis rallied around the Hindu forces and fought with courage, but nothing seemed possible to save Sanjan, and the Parsis were forced to flee again. Yet we know that the governor was not a Hindu but a Muslim, and furthermore, there is no archaeological evidence as to wars or conflicts. What's more, if the text had not mentioned it, the episode would have remained unknown to anyone because there was no mention of Sanjan at all in various texts. Also, had a major invasion taken place, one would think that it would have become part of the collective memory, especially since it is described at length in the Qisseh.
It's only when Baman Kaikobad starts writing this Qisseh Sanjan and he bases it on his oral tradition that he has heard from his teachers and his masters, it's only then you get to know about this migration. Now, if there was an invasion, this invasion would probably have had to take place, as I said, at the end of the 12th century, early 13th century at the latest. And so it could not have been Muhammad Begra who invaded Zanjan. It could not have been any of the later sultans. It may have been someone much earlier, if there was such an invasion. Once the Zoroastrians came to India, there seems to have been a correspondence which they set up with the Zoroastrians in Iran. And these are a group of letters called the Riwayats. And the Riwayats number about 26. They start from 1478. These are letters that Zoroastrians in India wrote to other Zoroastrians in Iran, asking questions about religious performance of several rites and ceremonies and customs, right? And interestingly, from 1478 onwards, when these riwayats begin, you realize that the people who are carrying the letters or the people who are sending the letters, the sponsors of these letters, are people who are settled in several places like Navsari or Khambat or other places. Never is Zanjan mentioned. It is not even a memory.
Whatever the case, in the 13th century, the Parsis took their holy fire and sought refuge in the mountains of Barot. Today, one can get a glimpse of the hardships this journey entailed. It takes 3 hours to climb up the steep sides of the mountain over rocks and boulders. The heat and humidity can be overpowering. The Parsis had to be fleeing from something. If not an invading army, then something menacing enough as to warrant this hard climb. According to Dr. Homi Dalla, this is proof that the Qisseh Zanjan describes real events, even though there is no real archaeological evidence to back up this hypothesis.
So at last we are here at the Barot caves after a very hot and tough climb of 1800 feet. These are the caves where our ancestors brought the Iran Shah after Zanjan was attacked by the army of Altaf Khan at the end of the 14th century. The Hindu ruler requested the Zoroastrians to help out, and one Ardeshir, who was one of the leaders, he took the lead and collected 1400 people, and they helped the Hindus fight Altaf Khan's army. But unfortunately, we didn't succeed, and there was no other option but to leave Zanjan in a crisis situation and bring the Iran Shah here to the Barot caves.
These caves are supposed to have sheltered the holy fire of the Zoroastrians for over 12 years, and as such, they ought to be a place of remembrance. But despite repeated efforts by Dr. Dalla to have this place recognized as a heritage site, the caves remain in a sorry state.
The main cave needs to be conserved urgently. You can see that a part of the ceiling has already given way, and these three columns that you see, just stubs, they have already broken down over a period of time. And then when we go towards this side, you can see that the damage that has already been done, especially on this column, there is a big crack here, and the crack is increasing over a period of time, and some urgent repairs should be undertaken by the Archaeological Survey of India. Again, this part of the cave has already given way. As you can see, this huge boulder has separated from the main cave, you see. And of course, this has happened over a period of decades because unfortunately Barot lacks maintenance or repairs or conservation. And I've been requesting the government and the Archaeological Survey of India to take up this matter seriously. I had initiated this project about 11 years ago and have been pursuing it all these years, and fortunately the Archaeological Survey has put up this railing because it was very dangerous. There is a valley down there, and if somebody slips, it could be sure death for them. So this is a very positive thing that has happened. And the other thing is that they have put up a plaque in 3 languages giving a brief description of the Barot caves. This is in Marathi, in Hindi and in English. And it says that these caves are very simple and belong to the early centuries of the Christian era. And they are protected site by the Archaeological Survey of India.
After this episode, the Iran Shah was transferred to other places before it finally arrived in the town of Udvada in 1742. It is still there today, and hundreds of pilgrims gather each year to receive its blessing and moral force.
The fire temple which you see over here was first consecrated by the Parsis after we came to India and after we landed at Sanjan. This fire, the alats of this fire, means the important factors to consecrate a fire temple, was brought from Khorasan, Iran by the Parsis. So the fire which is burning inside is around about 1290 years old, which is burning perpetually, blessing the community and looking after the peace and progress of the community and the world at large. This is now the oldest and the most traditional fire temple in the world, though we have in Yaz, but that is now not being kept accordingly what it should be done traditionally. So now this fire becomes absolutely an old traditional fire temple and the most important place of worship for all the Zoroastrians across the globe.
The Qisseh Sanjan ends by praising Ahura Mazda and the prophet Zarathustra. It requests the reader, who has been touched by the light of knowledge through his reading of the text, to pray for the soul of the author. Henceforth, the holy fire is safe. For nearly 1,300 years, the Parsis have tended to it and have received its blessing. It is the holiest of holy fires. In the hierarchy of holy fires, it may be the most important one, but it must not be forgotten that it is first and foremost a symbol, the symbol of the light that allows one to see and choose the right path. The Parsis may be immigrants, but they have not forgotten their ancient culture. Iran as it was before the Arab invasions, the great Persian empires, Sasanians or Achaemenians, the mythical Kayanians and Pishdadians. The Shahnameh by the great Persian poet Ferdowsi is a fabulous bridge that connects the Parsis to their ancient culture. Studied and even revered in Iran, for the Parsis it is a major historical source. It chronicles the successive waves of invasions, those of Alexander of Macedonia and the Arab conquests that destroyed the precious texts that retraced the history of ancient Persia and, to a certain degree, that of the Zoroastrian religion.
Shahnameh also gives glimpses of the religion also, like the use, the reverence to fire, like it was there right since the Pishdadian period, the celebration of Jashans, like the Mergan, the Sadeh, the Nowruz. We are told that was there from the Pishdadian period. The wearing of the Kusti, that is traced back in the Shahnameh. The use of the Dakhme, like how important Dakhme was for the people over there. The kings also, like, Even an enemy was given the honor of being put into the Dakme. That was the last honor that they could give, even to an enemy king. So all these religious aspects are also covered in the Shahnameh. The Shahnameh is not just a chronicle of history or of kings, but it's also, in a way, if you read it from that point of view, it also preserves the Zoroastrian religion in a way. Like one would never know how it was used in those times unless the Shahnameh would have told us. So Shahnameh is a very precious heritage for all Zoroastrians.
Neither the Qisseh Sanjan nor the Shahnameh are historical texts as such. They are both based on oral traditions, various beliefs, and legends linked to the elaboration of the great Persian empires. The Shahnameh speaks of the beginning of the Aryan migrations, and this coincides with the birth of Zoroastrianism. The gathas, or the hymns put down by Zoroaster himself, are contemporaries of the ancient Indian Rigvedas. And fire has, from time immemorial, been regarded as sacred. It represents the universe. The sacrificial fire allows the human being to participate in the workings of the universe through mediums, of which poetry remains one of the most effective. The Qisseh Sanjan is poetry, as are the Shahnameh and the gathas. It is undoubtedly for this reason that oral tradition has been so well preserved.
That's why religions have parables, and that's why even when history is in poetry form as an epic, the Shahnameh is of course an epic. So if it's in a poetry form, if it's in a story form, so it's very well preserved like that. The Zoroastrians in India consider the Shahnameh as one of their main links, main connections to Iran, to their original motherland. And the main aspects of the religion, the prehistory of the religion, as you could say, the pre-Achaemenian history, if you can call it history, that is in a way best kept or best preserved in the Shahnameh. Though we do have mention of Pishladian and Kayanian kings in the Avesta and the Pelvi also. But the way it is given in detail, in chronological order, lyrically, in the Shahnameh it doesn't occur anywhere else.
Long ago, the Mazdian religion was very close to the Vedic cults in that it stressed the sacred character of fire and water. Then Zoroaster appeared. He revolutionized Mazdaism by transforming it into the first monotheistic religion, precisely one that inspired Judaism, Christianity, Manichaeism, and then Islam. Even if the natural elements were still essential, it was with Zoroaster that the concept of one unique God appeared. He was the first to speak of a just God. The ancient divinities were sometimes quick-tempered and at other times whimsical. It was again he who put forward the idea of man faced with the choice between good and evil, between light and darkness. It is also to Zoroaster that we owe the essential triad of philosophical and religious thought: good words, good thoughts, good deeds. He is in many respects the first great philosopher. And in order to assist the human being in his quest, he imagined the Amesha Spentas, or heavenly beings.
We mortal people cannot comprehend fully, cannot understand fully the working of the universe. It is beyond our imagination. So this particular philosophy is being broken up. So what Zarathustra did was he introduced the concept of divinities, different divinities. There are higher divinities, there are lower divinities. So the higher divinities were known as Amesha Spentas. All the other divinities are known as Yazatas. Yazata means, the very meaning of Yazata, one is worthy of worship. So all the divine beings. The only idea is to sort of a breakup. Just like in democracy, for in India, we have a prime minister, correct? A prime minister is supposed to be the head of entire all administration, but he cannot administer everything on his own. So obviously there must be ministers under him. Under them again there are ministers of state working under them. So likewise this hierarchy is there, administrative hierarchy. So this type of spiritual hierarchy is being formulated by Zarathustra in order to understand the working of the universe, the working of organism.
It is precisely this triad of good words, good thoughts, and good deeds that was adopted by the Persian empires and allowed emperors such as Cyrus and Darius the Great to show such tolerance and magnanimity. It is this religion that was instrumental in the expansion of the Sassanid Empire under brave kings such as Ardeshir and Shapur. It is again this religion that allowed Zoroastrians from Persia to embark on this incredible journey which preserved their faith and their livelihoods. Lastly, it is this religion that would turn Parsis into some of the most influential and celebrated Indian philanthropists. In Iran, the land that witnessed the birth of the religion of Zoroaster, untold numbers of their co-religionists would continue to flee harsh living conditions over the centuries.